I'm curious to get your take on this. I'm still learning and, forming opinions and perspectives, but AI, artificial intelligence, what do we need to be mindful of from a point of human transformation as we're entering into this new time period where human connection, I think, is going to grow in importance to navigate some of this complexity going forward?
Um, AI. I have not seen in my time on the planet anything that is going to disrupt systems faster than AI. When we think about something happening rapidly, we talk about, a generation or two generally.
Yeah.
But remember that whatever we're experiencing as human beings on the planet is going to be dictated by the systems in which we live and work, even though we might not even be aware of them. That's just the way, it's the way everything works. And so, as societies, things move relatively slowly. It takes 50 years to change anything in education, 40, 45 years to change anything in healthcare. So that's, relatively slowly. We are looking at AI basically changing and in many ways destroying legacy systems in ways that we can't even fathom yet. I mean, think about this. In 2 to 3 years, we are going to have mass job loss around the world. Mass job loss. Why? Because AI is going to be doing those jobs. Now, will any of those benefits be flowing to the people who lose those jobs? Not right now, they won't. All those benefits are going to flow to the big companies or the companies that are using that AI to reduce their costs. So, how's society going to be with, millions and millions of unemployed people with basically jobs that are never coming back?
Mhm.
How's society going to react to that? I think that's the first thing
Yeah.
that I worry about that because that's 2 to 3 years away.
Yeah. Well, and
And yeah, so that would be my first thought. There's others. I mean, I could see AI getting smarter than we are, and whoa, then what?
it's interesting to gain your perspective, which I value and I appreciate, because once again, I'm looking to continuously learn. I think back to 1994 was the year the internet reached the mass consciousness of humanity. 30 years now, and you look at really all of the exponential transformations that have happened at a macro level, and some are great and amazing. The fact that you and I are having this conversation and we're seeing each other and it's a shared experience. I mean, that was even impossible to fathom. I remember being a kid growing up in the 80s and looking in the Sears Christmas catalog, and there was a telephone with a little video LCD screen. It was like 80s, late 80s, early 90s. And I was like, I want one of those so that I could call my grandmother and see her face to face. And then here we are, and we have this capability. But then there's also the kind of the down and the dark side of things too, that people don't want to talk about. But and that's why I'm asking very just openly, what are people's different perspectives? And so now, when you think about November 30th, 2022, that was the year that Chat GPT, AI, if you will, reached the mass consciousness of humanity. Just like the internet. The internet was around before 94, but it was academia, it was military, it was government. Same thing. AI has been around, but now it's mass consciousness. ChatGPT went from 0 to 100 million users in 2 months. Exponential. It's the exponential curve that of technology. Now you add AI to that fuels it further, farther, faster. And human thinking is traditionally more linear. And so it's creating this gap. And that gap is where some of maybe the confusion, the complexity, the chaos comes in. But to your point, transformational at the macro level, job loss, job displacement, new jobs, of course. But what do you do? How do people navigate? Like hypothetically, it's a great mental thinking exercise. You're a bank or credit union, community bank, credit union CEO, because that's typically our primary market of focus is the community. And in the next 2 to 3 years, there's massive job displacement, job loss. Well, how is that going to impact your community institution, your community organization? It's a mental exercise. What are you going to do to give people help? What are you going to do to give people hope during that period of time? And I don't have the answers per se. I'm just as much asking the questions just to ask the questions so that I maybe perhaps think about them. I think to the point of the mind here, you can have a statement or you can ask a question. I tend to think in more questions than statements because I'm trying to open my mind to new possibilities. But it's a fair point that you're making, David. As as we start to wrap up here, I want to end on a positive note, though. Looking out towards the future when it comes to human transformation, what are you hopeful about? What's giving you the greatest feeling of, you know what? We as human beings, we still have a vast amount of potential to co-create, to collaborate, to create value for one another. What's giving you the greatest hope for the future?
I would say the fact that um, the law of dissipative structures is now on steroids. And I mention this because the law of dissipative structures is working at the level of human consciousness too, or of the mind. And we are not, I do not believe that we're going to make it in the current form as a humanity with the same consciousness that we have right now. I think the biggest issue that we face on the planet right now is moving beyond the existing consciousness that we've had for actually a very long time to something that is inclusive. Now, in the universe, all systems are connected from the macro to the micro.
Yeah.
You know, we can't find a place where one system ends and another one begins. You and I are connected. You know, I can't do something to you without doing something to myself.
Yes.
And the problem that we have is that we have been fed, I think, two huge myths. One of them is that we are separate. We're separate from each other. We're separate from nature. We're separate from life. We're separate from the stars. None of that is true. And the second one is scarcity,
Mm.
that there's not enough, better get enough for ourselves, and don't worry about it because we're separate. If something happens over there, it's not going to make any difference over here. That's also a myth. Bucky Fuller proved that it was a myth. He said if we just shared, there was enough to go around where every single human being could live a higher standard of living than even some of the top people were living at the time. He estimated the carrying capacity, if we shared on the planet for humanity, was 13 million people. We passed the carrying capacity of the planet with our scarcity myth in 1971.
Yeah.
So we're living on borrowed time right now. Somehow we've got to raise human consciousness to a level where we can support each other and all life on the planet, as opposed to what's in it for me.
And that right there is such a great way to wrap up today's conversation. What can we do? What can you do who are watching and listening to help guide others, to help others grow in a period of complexity, to provide them with help, to provide them with hope? But I want to get your thought on this, David. I always like to wrap up with a very practical perspective, something that someone can do right now to apply what we've been discussing here. And how can someone do that? How can they begin to either raise their level of consciousness, awareness, or those that they're working with to impact positive change and transformation to go beyond where they're at now to an even bigger, better, brighter future full of hope and opportunity? What would be the one thing that they could commit to do right now in the present moment that leads to that future creation?
I would I actually have two things that I would share with anyone who's listening. Number one, whatever you can do to quiet your mind, start there. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be meditation, it could be yoga, it could be spending time in nature, just anything that you can do to quiet your mind. Whatever it is, it's going to be tied to the breath in some way. But just that's one. And then I have no idea whether this is going to work or not, but I'm starting a thing called the 100 Million Dreamers Project. And the purpose will be to get 100 million people around the world setting their intent to dream a new dream for the planet, which I believe will work just like large group meditation in changing the physical reality. So I'll have scripts and so forth that'll probably be available on our new website in a couple of weeks. But very, very simple. You set your intent at night for whatever it is you would most like to see uh, on the planet. It can be anything. And then just, that's all you do. And just go ahead and you'll dream, and you'll dream with other people that will be setting a similar intent. And I think we can change the consciousness of the world doing this if we get lucky.
Well, I think about a conversation that I had with Keith Costello, who is the founder, one of the founders and CEO of Locality Bank out of the South Florida market. And I know Keith is a big meditator. It is part of his daily activity that he does, and he's spoken publicly about the benefits that has had for him, but also for those around him as well. So, very practical takeaway right there, David. Thank you so much, and thanks for today's conversation. I am grateful for the time that we have shared together.